Welcome back after the break. You're watching Indus News and I'm Fiza Jamal with our latest stories in detail. We'll start with India, where nearly 2 million people have been rendered stateless after the Assam state government excluded them from its list of citizens. Assam's BJP-controlled administration says it plans to deport undocumented Bangladeshi Muslim immigrants. Assam's population is 34% Muslim, the second highest of any Indian state. Responding to the decision, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan said the international community should take notice of the ethnic cleansing of Muslims in India. He said India's illegal annexation of occupied Kashmir is also a part of wider policy to target Muslims. And economic growth in India has fallen to its lowest level since Prime Minister Narendra Modi took power 5 years ago. The National Statistical Office reports GDP growth for the 3 months up to June dipped to 5%. The growth rate for the same period last year was 8%. Government data also shows a rapid deceleration from 5.8% growth in the first quarter of the year. But the Modi administration has sought to deflect criticism of its economic policies.
This has been on account of both exogenous and endogenous factors. The government is quite alive to the situation, especially global headwinds arising out of deceleration in the developed economies and Sino-American trade conflict has contributed to the slowdown.
Despite this deflection, many economists believe India's GDP will continue to exhibit negative growth rate this year. Moving on, Pakistan has welcomed the U.S. House Committee on Foreign Affairs' decision to hold a hearing on the situation in Indian-occupied Kashmir soon. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi has described the decision as a major development for the disputed territory. In an interview, Qureshi said dialogue with India is only possible if it ends the curfew and other human rights violations in Kashmir. Speaking on the same issue, India has detained 4,500 civilians in occupied Kashmir since August the 5th under the controversial Public Safety Act. The law gives Indian forces sweeping powers to detain anyone for up to 2 years without a trial. The principal planning secretary in Indian-occupied Kashmir, Rohit Kansal, says politicians, businessmen, lawyers and social activists are being held under the draconian law. Indian occupation forces have arrested more than 10,000 Kashmiris so far. Meanwhile, India has scrutinized about 3,500 social media accounts of individuals posting pro-Kashmir comments. India has written to Twitter to have many accounts suspended from the micro-blogging platform. Human Rights Watch says India's clampdown in occupied Kashmir has deprived people of vital healthcare facilities. In a report, the rights body said Kashmiris no longer have access to life-saving treatments such as chemotherapy and dialysis. Human Rights Watch said the situation in Indian-occupied Kashmir is deteriorating with time. It condemned the arrests of Kashmiri doctors by Indian occupation forces. "24 people died when a bus plunged into a stream after a bridge collapsed in a remote area of northern Pakistan. Police say the vehicle was carrying a wedding party when it fell into a gushing channel in the upper Kohistan region. Civil defense officials says the victims belong to the same tribe. Rescue workers are finding it difficult to recover their bodies because of the poor telecommunications in the mountainous area. U.S. President Donald Trump says Washington had good negotiations with the Taliban, but a deal has not yet been reached. President Trump says the number of troops in Afghanistan will be reduced to 8,600. Earlier, the Taliban said they are close to a deal with the United States as the final points are being discussed in negotiations. The U.S. and Taliban are engaged in their 9th round of peace talks in Doha to end the 18-year-long Afghan war. Meanwhile, Afghanistan's government says the Taliban have launched an assault on the northwestern city of Kunduz. Presidential spokesman Siddiqui says insurgents have taken up positions in residential areas of the city. He says government forces are fighting to expel Taliban units that launched a multi-pronged attack at midnight. Taliban spokesman Zabiullah Mujahid has described the attack as large-scale. This is the third time Kunduz has come under attack since the Taliban briefly captured it in 2015. A U.S. serviceman has been killed during combat operations in Afghanistan. NATO has reported the latest American casualty, while U.S. diplomats are in Doha negotiating a peace deal with the Taliban. NATO's Resolute Support Mission says the latest death raises the number of U.S. soldiers killed in Afghanistan this year to 15. 2 others died last week. 14,000 U.S. soldiers are currently deployed in the country. The U.S. has set a trial date for the alleged master planner of the 9/11 attacks, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. He will be tried along with 4 other men at a military court in Guantanamo Bay from January 2021. The men are charged with war crimes, including terrorism and the murder of 3,000 people. The 9/11 Commission report named Khalid Sheikh Mohammed as the principal architect of the September 2001 attacks. 10 American teenagers have been wounded in a shooting during a high school football game in Alabama. Mobile Police Chief Lawrence Batiste says it is unclear whether there was a fight before the shooting broke out. He said half of the gunshot victims are in critical condition.
10 individuals injured from the age of 15, ranging from age 15 to 18. It's not acceptable in our community. We won't tolerate it. We'll be more aggressive in what we do as a law enforcement community to hold those individuals accountable.
And police have also detained 2 suspects for questioning. And now we move on to Palestine, where Israeli forces have wounded 87 Palestinians during weekly protests at the Gaza border. Medics say 44 demonstrators were shot with live rounds. A journalist and medic are also among the wounded. The protesters were calling on Israel to lift its blockade of the Gaza Strip imposed in 2007. Over 300 Palestinians have been killed since the weekly protests were launched in March 2018. Meanwhile, the U.S. has announced it will impose sanctions on Lebanon and Oman aimed at closing off financing to Hezbollah and Hamas. The sanctions target Lebanon's Jamal Trust Bank, accusing it of acting as a key financier for Hezbollah. In a statement, the U.S. Treasury Department said the bank was a direct threat to the integrity of the Lebanese financial system. The department is also targeting Omani individuals it says are middlemen funneling cash to Hamas in Gaza. It says it will work with Lebanon's central bank to deny Hezbollah access to the international financial system. Lebanon's Finance Minister Ali Hassan Khalil said the banking sector can handle the impact of U.S. sanctions. The U.S. has also imposed sanctions on 2 people and 3 firms that helped North Korea evade United Nations curbs. And the U.S. Treasury Department has also blacklisted the Iranian oil tanker Adrian Darya and imposed sanctions on its captain. The ship has been at the center of a diplomatic controversy since it was seized by Gibraltar in July for busting EU sanctions on Syria. The Treasury Department says the vessel has been declared blocked property under an anti-terrorist order. It says anyone providing assistance to the tanker will be sanctioned by the U.S. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says the ship is heading towards Syria. The UN atomic watchdog says Iran has scaled down its compliance with the 2015 nuclear deal. In a report, the International Atomic Energy Agency said Tehran has exceeded the limits of both enriched and refined uranium. It said Iran's enriched uranium stock is still below the level it possessed before the deal. Iran's envoy to the IAEA says the new report verifies Tehran's commitment to the nuclear deal. Iran breached the enriched uranium stockpile limit in July in retaliation to U.S. withdrawal from the accord last year. European signatories to the Iran nuclear deal will meet today in an attempt to preserve the treaty. Britain, France and Germany will also discuss ways to protect shipping in the Gulf. European foreign ministers will also be joined by EU diplomatic chief Federica Mogherini. The talks will take place on the sidelines of an ongoing EU defence meeting in Helsinki. The UK's Foreign Minister Dominic Raab says the meeting will build on the G7's positive talks on Iran. He says London will call for more international support to protect shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. Earlier, Mogherini welcomed the notion of Iran-US talks on the condition of first preserving the deal. Moving on, war monitors said airstrikes on Syria's northwestern Idlib region stopped after the government agreed to a Russian-backed ceasefire. This ceasefire was reached following 4 months of deadly bombardment. The Syrian Observatory said there are no warplanes in the sky and airstrikes have stopped. The truce is the latest Russian-led effort to avert what the UN has described as one of the worst humanitarian nightmares in Syria's conflict. Russia's defense ministry urged Syrian militant groups to join the ceasefire. Earlier, Turkey's Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu said Russia has assured Ankara there will be no attacks on its posts in northwest Syria. Cavusoglu said continued attacks by Syrian forces in rebel-held Idlib could unleash another wave of refugees to Europe. He said the Turkish military will leave Syria once a settlement to the conflict is reached. A suicide attack has killed 6 southern separatists in Yemen's port city of Aden. The attacker crashed his bomb-laden motorbike into a vehicle driven by separatists. ISIS has claimed responsibility for the attack. This is the first such attack since separatists retook control of Aden from Yemeni government forces on August the 10th. Earlier, Yemen's government asked Saudi Arabia to intercede with the UAE to stop its military support for southern separatists. The UAE claims it launched airstrikes against terrorists who attacked coalition forces at Aden airport. Yemen's defense ministry says over 300 people were killed and wounded in the raids on Aden and Abyan province. Well, now it's time for me to take a short break. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. After the break, you're watching Indus News, and I'm Fiza Jamal with our latest stories in detail. Well, ancient human remains dating back more than 3,000 years have been discovered in Yemen's capital, Sana'a. Archaeologists found bones and other artifacts in the mountain ranges of Shamlan. You'll find the details in this report.
The capital city of Sana'a is believed to have been founded 2.5 millennia ago. But the culture treasures of the city have been greatly damaged by recent wars. Experts believe the recently found ancient remains belong to 2 bodies that were most likely mummified.
It is possible to construct the whole body from what was collected through the bone samples of the destroyed skeletons, but the body, however, will not contain the mummification and packaging materials from the mummification process. What happened is considered a crime of destruction of antiquities and heritage due to the fact that the mummy is a historical treasure and a knowledge treasure for civilization.
The mummies have been extracted by looters looking for gold. Minister of Culture Abdullah Al-Kibsi says the remains belong to settlers who resided in the area at the end of the Stone Age.
After this discovery, we completely scored the area from its beginning to its end, and we sent a specialized team from the Antiquities Authority to investigate and explore other discoveries in this area. This specialized team was able to find more than one site and more than one grave and cave.
Folklore calls Yemen the cradle of the Arabs, but its ancient heritage is threatened by years of war.
Massive demonstrations will be staged across Britain today against Prime Minister Boris Johnson's move to suspend Parliament. Organisers say hundreds of thousands of people are expected to part in the protests organised under the catchphrase "Stop the Coup." They say protest is the only way to force the government to change course. Johnson's decision to suspend Parliament until mid-October has been widely condemned by MPs and opponents of a no-deal Brexit. The suspension has prompted legal challenges in London, Edinburgh and Belfast. A public petition against the proroguing of Parliament has pulled in more than 1.6 million signatures. Critics of Prime Minister Boris Johnson say that he has exacerbated the political crisis over Brexit, but Johnson has warned an attempt by MPs to stop a no-deal Brexit will make it more likely. In Russia, the Defense Ministry has released a video of a test firing of its new nuclear-capable cruise missile, Kalibr. The ministry claimed the missile has a range of 2,000 kilometers. The missile successfully hit its target after being fired during Navy drills in the Black Sea. The Defense Ministry says it has been designed for conflicts with other navies. However, if it's armed with nuclear warheads, the missile can wipe out cities from a great distance. And now in Colombia, security forces have killed 9 members of a dissident rebel faction in a raid in the southern San Vicente del Saguan region. President Iván Duque says a clear message has been sent to the rebel leaders. Last week, dissident leaders of the FARC insurgent group rejected a 2016 peace agreement and announced a return to arms. Colombian President Duque said he authorized the military operation against the resurgent faction. He described them as a gang of narco-terrorist criminals challenging the government's writ. Over 2,000 FARC fighters refuse to recognize the peace deal signed 3 years ago. The U.S. prepares for the deadly Hurricane Dorian as forecasts for the Category 4 hurricane make it the deadliest in the last 3 decades. With statewide emergency declared for hurricane, the coastal areas of the U.S. are expected to experience heavy showers and possible flooding. More details in this report.
The National Hurricane Center says Dorian is even stronger than ever and is now packing 140 miles per hour winds. Every county in Florida is under a state of emergency and preparations are underway to fight the natural calamity that lays ahead. Hurricane Dorian is on track to smack Grand Bahama Island on Sunday and Florida or Georgia coasts around Monday morning. Transportation has been suspended and evacuations are underway.
Let me be extremely clear. Those who refuse to evacuate place themselves in great danger from this very powerful and potentially life-threatening hurricane, which will bring dangerously strong and high wind surge.
The storm began Friday over the Atlantic as a Category 2, gained Category 3 strength later in the day. Forecasters predicted the storm would grow more ferocious as it gained fuel from the warm waters of Florida. The storm could roll inland towards Orlando on Tuesday or early Wednesday, weakening as it moves away from the sea. Trump says Florida faces absolute monster hurricane. People have started lining up for gas, stockpiling resources.
But it really began to form and form big, and now it's looking like it could be an absolute monster. We're ready. We have the best people in the world ready, and they're going to help you. We're shipping food, we're shipping water, but it may be that you're going to evacuate. We're going to see what happens. We're waiting. It does seem almost certain that it's hitting dead center, and that's not good.
The U.S. President Donald Trump has cancelled a planned trip to Poland so he can make sure resources are properly directed for the storm.
The World Health Organization says the ongoing fires in the Amazon rainforest is causing more respiratory problems, especially in children. Home to 30 million people, the Amazon has a fragile ecosystem providing vital food and water that is being threatened. The World Health Organization Director, Dr. Maria Neira, says particle pollutants will remain in the air for a long time. She said people living closest to the fires have been evacuated. However, the inferno is unlikely to cause long-term health problems such as high rates of cancer.
We're looking at what could be the short-term effects of this exposure to the smoke generated by the wildfire, and they will be more related to respiratory diseases, of course.
And in the world of business, factory activity in China has shrunk for a fourth consecutive month, reflecting the impact of the trade war with the U.S. The National Bureau of Statistics shows the Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index fell to 49.5% in August. Many economists had expected the index to stay put at the July level of 49.7. Any number below 50 points represents a fall in manufacturing activity, but China's services sector picked up for the first time in 5 months in August. The National Bureau of Statistics says the non-manufacturing purchasing managers index rose marginally to 53.8%. President Donald Trump says the Federal Reserve is harming the U.S. economy more than the trade wars could. President Trump says the Federal Reserve is allowing a strong dollar to make American exports less competitive. Hitting out at the central bank, the president said the U.S. does not have a tariff problem. Trump said European countries are getting a big export and manufacturing advantage as the euro falls against the dollar. The remarks came 2 days before Washington is due to impose new tariffs on Chinese products. Although it's quite hot today in Lahore, but it's still pleasant compared to the other days. But let's see what the weather is looking like where you live. Well, these are all the main stories in detail I had for you this hour. For further updates, stay tuned to Indus News.